Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the IBM for Midsized Business Social Business Futurecast. We're coming live from the Mid-Market IBM YouTube channel. We hope that you're enjoying the session that we're having today. Don't forget, just a couple plugs for our social channels. You can follow us on Twitter at IBM Mid-Market. You can also follow along with this Futurecast on Twitter using hashtag Futurecast or hashtag IBMSMB. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, facebook.com/midmarketIBM. You can join our LinkedIn group, linked.in/midmarketIBM. And of course, if you're watching live on YouTube, you can subscribe to us here at youtube.com/midmarketIBM. So we have a couple of participants here today. We're really looking forward to this particular event. 4 people have joined us. 3 are currently with us. One of our participants hopefully will be joining us in a little bit. He's having some technical issues, but we wanted to introduce the panel for today. Laurie McCabe, who tweets from @LaurieMcCabe, is a subject matter expert with mid-sized businesses and entrepreneurs who want to apply tech solutions to help enhance their business. She tweets from @LaurieMcCabe, and she's joining us from Florida today, you said. Laurie, you're usually based out of Bedford, New Hampshire. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I think I'm pretty happy to be here.
So welcome. Ed Brill, who tweets from @EdBrill. He is Director of Social Business Product Management for IBM. He's the author of the forthcoming book, Opting In, which is being released in January of 2013. He's an opinion writer, dad, traveler, photographer. Ed is joining us from just outside Chicago this morning from Highland Park, Illinois. Good morning, Ed.
And good morning, Jeff.
And Hanley Cameron, who tweets from @Hanley. Hanley is technology manager for Prolifics, an IBM business partner, and an expert in social business. And Hanley is joining us from Dunwoody, Georgia. How you doing this morning, Hanley?
Good morning. Good.
Great. So, and also we have, and he jumped in a little bit late this morning, but Luis Suarez, who tweets from @ELSUA. Luis is knowledge manager, community builder, and social computing evangelist in the IBM Software Group division. He's also known as an IBMer who does not use email. And has been featured in Wired Magazine regarding this. And he's joining us today from Barcelona, Spain. So, Luis, welcome. I know you've had a little bit of technical issues this morning, but we're glad to have you here. So, one of the things before we get started is social business, a term that a lot of people throw around. Some people think it means social media. Some people think it's a business that's giving to social causes. I wanted to ask Ed this particular question. What does social business mean by definition in terms of how IBM perceives the terminology?
Right. So we view a social business as an organization that is embracing the concept of how to bring people together with people and people together with business process in a way that is more engaged and transparent and agile. And the notion is really that the tools are similar in nature to the ideas that come from social media, but how to apply those to a business both within the organization and also when working with the entire ecosystem around selling a product or service that includes customers and partners and suppliers and even the competition.
So knowing how IBM looks at the terminology of social business, I wanted to ask the panel. We have a number of questions here. The first one, though, is what does, and we want to think about mid-sized businesses here, and that's our audience for today. But what does a mid-sized business look like now, currently in 2012, as we're about to enter 2013, in its daily operations? Who would like to start with that particular question?
Yeah, I mean, I can take a crack at that. I mean, we did a pretty large social business survey earlier in the year, and I think that for most mid-sized businesses today, they're still grappling with the whole idea of how do I how do I supplement my traditional kinds of applications and tools with some of the newer social business tools, and how do I integrate all that? And at the end of the day, how can I do jobs that I need to do better with some of these new social solutions? So I think for a lot of mid-sized businesses, we're still kind of early on in terms of what we've seen, but they do realize that this is what they're going to need to do in terms of transforming their business.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we're seeing a lot of them that they understand they want to get into social and how important it is, but there have been recently just focused on operational, how are we getting work done, and then they don't really know how to take those first steps.
And Ed, how would you characterize most businesses right now who are medium sized in this area at the moment, as we're about to sort of enter a new year in 2013?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of awareness of the first phase, the social media phase, kind of the question you were asking earlier. There's the notion of participating in the conversation on an external basis, and the opportunity now is how do we expand that into a full embed social into business process kind of point of view.
Mm.
And I think, I'd pipe in there that I think the whole, social media phenomenon, that external phenomenon of using a lot of the public social media venues like Twitter and YouTube and LinkedIn, Facebook, that's really where we see a lot of the mid-market companies at today. They're kind of getting up to speed on using social media as part of their marcom and marketing and sales activities, but they've yet to really think about how they integrate it into more of their overall business and how they operate day to day.
So that leads me to my next question for everyone. So say you're a mid-sized business, you really want to commit to software and culture right now. What would you look like 1 year from now, you think? I mean, just again, we're analyzing this and sort of forecasting things that we may not know, but it's sort of good to speculate in terms of a company or a mid-sized business that adopts this culture now. What would it look like a year from now? Ed, what do you think a company would look like, a medium-sized business that basically went into this territory?
Yeah, I mean, we've just started to do some studying of those, and within the next couple of days, IBM will release a study on social business from our Institute for Business Value, and we think that what the transformation is getting people engaged from all parts of the business, regardless of their title and where they sit on the org chart. That's kind of the first thing that happens, but it really has to be this cultural transformation of adopting the idea that it's okay to share your knowledge, and in fact, it's encouraged in terms of building your digital reputation and the expertise of the organization overall.
Hanley, Laurie, what do you think? What would a company look like a year from now if they really, really went headstrong into it and said, we have to adopt this now, so we're not left behind?
Well, I think as Ed said, that cultural transformation is really key before they think of any kind of tools or solutions. They really have to come to a mindset where they want to incent and reward team behavior and team collaboration and team achievement over that kind of more individual, each man for his own philosophy. So I think one of the big changes, if you really decided as a company that you want to go that way, is you would see a lot more of the things that the company needs to do to be successful oriented around a team structure, aside from any tools they use to accomplish that.
Yeah, one factor we're seeing is that the explosion of mobile is really starting to help drive the social side as well, because you've got people who are, they think of, okay, well, I check, whether it's Facebook or other updates, they're checking those on those mobile devices, and that's now extending in their business. And we've seen efforts for social collaboration kind of fizzle out a little bit in the past, where people didn't have that kind of access because they had to go back to their desk to go check in or update their status or whatever, and now they can carry their iPad, into a meeting, or they're on the road, or at a customer site or whatever, and they can actually keep connected to everybody. So that we're seeing mobile be a huge part of that, and that especially like with the recent releases of the updated Connections client, that's had a huge effect.
So you bring up I was going to say, you bring up a key term there, collaboration. So I mean, we hear that term quite a bit now in 2012, collaboration compared to competition. How do you get a company to adopt a collaborative model? Many companies still sort of are in this competitive model. What's the best way to sort of make that step if you wanted to get a mid-sized business to adopt this as part of their culture?
Well,
I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it has to be, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, I think it has to be a conviction that the leadership in the company has first, because if you work for a company where that collaborative type of culture is rewarded, as an employee, it's going to be a lot easier and a lot more natural for you to go that way. If you work in a company where the leaders of that company are more interested in, okay, we want to kind of have these individuals be the lone wolves, and we're going to kind of pit people in the company against each other and reward them for hoarding knowledge as opposed to sharing, it's probably not going to go anywhere. So it needs to be, I think, the leadership of the company has to be convinced. And, along the lines of what Hanley was saying, though, I think, more and more, as more of us are using mobile devices and cloud, and it is so much easier to collaborate, I think those technologies are going to help break down a lot of the boundaries, and also, I think, are leading to awareness on the part of everybody in business that this is going to happen. So whether it's something you innately believe or not, is the way to go. I don't really know if you can, go the other way. I think the collaborative model is where the puck is going.
I think part of that, getting the this is going to happen message out, is as you start planning your user adoption and getting these tools out, is looking at absolutely get that executive buy-in, but then also point people to how does this tie into your workflow? How do we get this so that you're actually able to get work done within the tools, and not just, oh, I've got this little thing where I update my status a couple of times a day. That's over on the side, but then if I don't update it, nobody cares. If you get it to where people can actually work with it and it becomes part of their workflow, that's where they go for information. Maybe you tell them, hey, we're going to turn off that file share. You've got to actually start sharing your information publicly.
Yeah.
That's a good way to go.
I mean, to me, it's like, how do you do more with these social tools than you could do with the traditional tools, right? So email is a great example. We all have that problem of, the overloaded email inbox, and at a certain point, email becomes an impediment to getting stuff done. So what are the social tools that we can bring in that make it easier to do what too many of us are still trying to do, maybe with email?
Yeah, I have a great example of that. We've actually done some studies here at IBM that show that our inside salespeople who have embraced sort of being digital IBMers, if we use a term, are more effective. They're multiple percentage points more effective at closing business and processing leads than their counterparts who are using more traditional tools like Gloria was describing, kind of living in that email environment. We think email is still a really important tool. We've introduced the first social mail tool that's on the market, but using these social tools really can improve productivity, and that's a great way to get organizational buy-in, is to prove it.
Yeah, Ed, I think you bring up a good point. I think there was a study done recently. I don't know the source to cite to, that said that the more digital workers were, including people who were in the C-suite, actually the more profitable that company is, and it's going to be interesting to watch those studies as we move into next year, as sort of digital becomes, I think, more commonplace with most employees. My next question, I mean, sort of pivoting here in terms of companies talk a lot about social business, how to adapt it, how to get more agile, be more competitive. But the big question I think a lot of companies have is, you know, they face a lot of issues getting to that point. What are some of the inhibitors I think that medium-sized businesses face? What are some of the things that you see out there that makes it hard for a lot of businesses to adopt?
Well, I mean, certainly, the whole cultural and mindset and, executive leadership, that has to be key. So if that's not there, might be kind of a lost cause to begin with. But after that, I think they're overwhelmed. A lot of mid-sized businesses are overwhelmed. I mean, there's so much, spewing out of the technology environment at them about the different things they're going to need to do, not just to become social businesses, but with cloud and mobile and everything else. So for them to kind of look at this whole big landscape and understand, where do I go? Where do I start? How do I get going? How can I do it incrementally? Because most medium businesses don't have a lot of IT people, and they can't absorb all the changes at once. They have to do it in a step-by-step way.
Yeah. I think other ones are one of the other issues people run into is understanding when we say social business. A lot of them, part of social is social media and Google and Facebook and YouTube and all that. But some of them get hung up on that. They say, okay, well, we got our marketing departments on Facebook now, so we're good. And they don't realize that what we're actually talking about is making their people more effective, internal collaboration, working that way, and some of them don't sort of understand both sides of it and kind of need somebody to help guide them. And to Laurie's point, these smaller companies, they're focused on, here's how much budget we have, here's how much even just time we have to work on this. So they need ways to do it, and they're scared of going down a path that may, lock them into a certain tool set, and then that tool becomes obsolete, and there's no way to be flexible with it.
Yeah, I think one of the risk factors that we've seen quite a bit is the notion that this technology is just another project that you roll out and IT puts it on the project plan like everything else. You really have to have somebody who's driving it internally, driving the culture. We at IBM set up people who are in ambassador roles that are doing sort of the enablement and the teaching of why these tools are useful. So you really have to have that organizational buy-in, often from the top, maybe not the CEO or C-suite, but getting the CIO and the CMO to work together and recognize that this is a transformation that they all need to lead. This isn't just something you're going to roll out.
And in terms of, some inhibitors, I think I've seen out there in the landscape. I mean, there's still some companies that require employees to, work from a centralized location. I mean, what's your take on the fact that companies sort of have to think a little bit differently in terms of we are more of a mobile society, or at least moving more in that realm? How do you sort of get? I guess my question for all of you here is, how do you get people to sort of think outside the box? Because we really have worked in office settings for almost the last 50 years.
Well, I think all the statistics we see and surveys we see, more and more people are not working from a company office location more of the time. So those numbers are going up, and I think people are seeing that. And I think people are realizing that they do have to have more mobile employees. I think the big hang up there is about a lot of the security concerns and regulatory concerns and issues like that. And how do they enable that more mobile workforce and enable that information sharing and all those conversations in that world without compromising in terms of security?
Well, I think if you look at where people are, IBM's kind of led the way in both cases here. Is that in the mid '90s when they mobilized a lot of their workforce, they kind of sent them home and said, okay, start working from home. You're going to be on a lot of conference calls, and I think that's sort of part of what brought forth a lot of these technologies for them developing even for themselves, because suddenly you have these people remote in their house and their only connection is email and a phone number, right? So now suddenly it's like, hey, there's better ways to have people connected in a much richer collaboration instead of just, okay, you're going to be on a conference call all day long.
Yeah.
And we see here that all of us are sitting in a home office on this webcast, right? And as Henley was saying, at IBM, half of us today in the U.S. work from a home office environment. myself included. My staff's all over the U.S. and worldwide, really. And we've evolved the tools. I can use my iPad anywhere as my office. And, I think that goes to a culture that then allows you to use the best people on the best projects, right? You don't have to worry about, let's just use the people who are here. Let's use our people wherever they are, and they can come together almost as a cloud, a talent cloud, to form the contributors and the expertise around getting a particular problem solved.
So Ed, you're almost looking at it like a world is flat type of theory. If there's a really good person who is excellent at biomechanics and they're based in the Philippines, there's no reason that they necessarily have to move and work in Chicago, let's say, or San Francisco. Social business will allow that company to use that person when needed on that particular project, and they can work from whatever environment they need to.
That's right. There's a project we're working on right now with a hospital based out of Boston where they're using doctors really literally all over the world to contribute expertise to solving, life-threatening situations. And it's no longer about, get me the best doctor in Boston. It's get me the best doctor in the world.
Yeah, and I think, for a mid-market company, especially if you're trying to expand your presence outside of your home turf or whatever, a lot of these social tools really enable that global conversation, both for the input that you're going to need and the knowledge you're going to need to get up and running maybe in another geography, as well as the talent that you're going to need to make it all happen. I don't think I think this is really making it easier for companies to be more global.
Well, I think for the mid-sized companies, they're out there and they're trying to compete with larger companies or even people their own size, but they're out there like, how do we leverage ourselves to project farther, right? The economy's become a worldwide economy, but they may have been a smaller regional, they're just in the north or the south or U.S. or another country, and suddenly they've got to operate on a global scale, but they're not, they don't have the funds to go double the size of their company and change the way they do operations, and this allows them to leverage those people and take much better, advantage of them.
So it's interesting. We've been talking about inhibitors, and now we're really moving more into some ways that social business can help companies. And I want to continue this discussion. Are there specific examples you have seen out there in your work, your day-to-day work, of what companies are doing more of, how they're really using social business to point their way forward for the next 5 years, as well as in terms of innovation?
Well, I'll just say before, I'll let some people give the customer examples. We just had a tweet come in that said something along the lines of, perhaps nothing proved the power of social business and networking better than being cut off due to Hurricane Sandy. And I think a lot of us can relate, even if we weren't personally hit with storm damage and power outages, the people that we can't communicate with all of a sudden because they were. And I think that's a pretty powerful statement right there.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that. I mean, I'm here in New Jersey, just outside New York. I have not been in my office in the past 2.5 weeks, and I've still done work with everyone that I've needed to do work with. Yes, I miss the sort of the human connection, but I've been able to actually do face-to-face time using some technology. So I do think it is interesting in terms of how that impacted a large metropolitan area like New York. In terms of most people are used to working in office environments, but I could see that sort of moving in a new area for many people just because of something that happened like this.
Well, I think even outside of the office environment, you had a lot of companies. Ours, I know IBM got affected, especially a lot of people in the ICS division. There are whole data centers that just for safety, they had backups and such, but our main data center was out on Long Island. And it's like, okay, we're just going to shut everything down because we don't want to risk something failing in the middle and all that. We're just going to do it down. So, we took down email for a day or two. We took down other pieces. And then, I know some IBMers had the same thing, but with all the social capabilities, reaching out to other connections, instances, things like that, we were able to continue working, continue connecting with each other, even if it wasn't through the channel that we normally would have.
So I think what's become the classic example of how a mid-sized company can get involved in social business is the conversion of the notion of a suggestion box into an online process of ideation. So I'll use an example that's not a mid-sized business, but it's a great way to illustrate it, and everybody can relate to it. It's, by the way, not entirely IBM technology, but I think it's just the best example in the market, which is mystarbucksidea.com. So Starbucks has sort of crowdsourced their product development cycle for what are the new things they need to offer in terms of product and service in their coffee houses. And customer innovation is now driving new ideas into their stores faster than their own R&D or consultants or think tanks could do. And that process applies really to any business. We work with a business partner called El Gucci Software that offers an ideation solution, as does our IBM Connections product, and it's kind of become the classic example of bringing the customer's voice inside of your organization.
So other forms of innovation, and it looks like Luis has joined us from Barcelona, so we'll ask him a couple questions in a little bit. But other types of innovation we've seen out there, or that you would like to see out there. I mean, that's always an interesting thing. What would you like to see more of in terms of social business over the next 5 years?
Well, from my vantage point, I think I would like to see more education in the mid-market to help and more guidance to really point them towards more definitive use scenarios and then how to accomplish them. Because I think most people right now get the fact that we have to do things differently, and these social tools and mobile tools and cloud tools combined with the generational shift of, younger people just being born and raised on this stuff, we all get it. What I think is the missing link for a lot of companies that don't have the resource of a Starbucks or a Coca-Cola or whoever is, how do I start this? How do I put a plan in place and I can do, these 2 or 3 things in year 1. These are going to give me the biggest bang for my buck in year 1, and then just keep working in a really iterative process towards becoming more and more productive with these social tools. So I would like to see more guidance and more specifics.
Well, I think another piece is we need more and more integration between them, right? Because as we talked about before, there's more new tools coming out. Even within the tools, there's new capabilities. A lot of the good things that Connections is doing with the open social API, so we can start to bring in other systems into those activity streams. Because part of it is we all get overwhelmed, right? There's so much information now. You've got Twitter, you've got your connection stream, you've got Facebook, you've got alerts through email from your back-end systems. You got all this stuff you got to deal with, and how are you going to manage all that? And as the mid-market companies, especially, as you said, the big ones, they can go, launch a giant project and have somebody come do integration. The medium ones, they just need to be able to wire things together and be able to run off with it, and not just overwhelm all their employees with, hey, we just gave you 5 other things you've got to watch every day.
Exactly, because they're spending more and more of their time doing a lot of this stuff, and they also need a way to measure the value.
Right. In the book that I have coming out in January, I talk about this notion of a slimcast instead of a broadcast, which I borrowed the term from a company I worked for actually 20 years ago. They had this idea that instead of reaching every entity in their network, they needed to be able to reach just certain demographics or geographies or whatever it may be. And I think that the tools need to evolve in that direction, and that's really important for a mid-market company to not succumb to what Hanley was just describing of sort of overwhelming sense of here's all this information and how are we going to react to it all. So I think that the tools will hopefully evolve in that direction to just sort of giving me the in-context information I need at any given time.
It's interesting. Lori touched on something about mid-sized businesses compared to larger businesses. There's actually a question that came in on Twitter from at B. Duperrin, BDUPERRIN. He's asking a question in terms of Europe. His question is, many mid-sized businesses in Europe where they're much smaller than in North America, still consider social business as something for large organizations. So how do you explain this perception gap? What do you tell them?
Well, I'll pipe in there just with some examples of even very small businesses that are, really taking advantage of social. You can enable, for instance, your customers to provide you with input on a Facebook feed about, what they'd like to see in terms of your services or your hours of operation or whatever. Which my hair salon does, and I think it maybe has about tops 10 employees. So, we don't always have to have a grandiose social business plan. The social business plan needs to fit your business and your business needs. And like I said, for my hair salon, that may be perfect. And then for a mid-sized business, it probably should be more encompassing in terms of mapping what you're doing in social to the business objectives. Is your business objective to grow into a new geography, into a new market, adding a new channel? So map those social initiatives to the business growth objectives.
And you can also do things like we've seen a lot of companies who are worried about, they're as we go through the generation shift, and you've got a lot of very experienced people who are getting near retirement age, and they've also got other systems and knowledge that they have that they want to take advantage of, but they haven't really been able to leverage that yet. But they can look at that as a way of giving them a business advantage over their competitors. Hey, we're the ones, even if it's a small company, or even as in Lori's suggestion of, what is it our customers need to know, and how can we interact with them? And even within the company, right? As Ed said, there may be somebody across the world or across the country in your company that has information that you need to be able to feed to people in another division, and be able to connect them and leverage that may be the big key that you have as a competitive differentiator, even over your manufacturing or whatever core business you have.
Yeah, when we talk to some mid-market organizations, we sort of talk about maybe the notion of just connecting your organization. Let's put the word social off to the side for a second. But every organization needs some way to track ad hoc activities, and every organization needs some way to identify the expertise profiles of the people who work there. And so there's these little components. Every organization needs a way to share files in a sort of more collaborative manner. There are these ways to introduce the technology that are sort of less threatening than making everybody think they have to write a blog or start a wiki or have that kind of a collaboration. You can sort of take baby steps. You don't have to adopt the full set of tools in the Swiss Army knife. You just take the one tool that's right for a particular job or a particular culture or a particular size organization. And while I have the microphone, sorry, if Luis is still out there, try Firefox instead of Safari. It seems much more reliable with the Hangout.
That's a great point, though, because I think most people use Facebook in their personal lives, right, to kind of keep up with their friends and family and everything else. And you have something like Connections or Competitive Solutions. And I think that's a great way to kind of introduce the organization, because it's a paradigm we're all already familiar with, and we already get the benefit of having that activity stream. So I think that's a great place to start.
It brings me to another question to add on to this, and that is, there's so many tools out there. Won't companies fear adopt? We see this quite a bit. You adopt something, and then in a year's time, 2 years' time, it's irrelevant, or there's another new tool, and you might be spending a lot of money in terms of software as a service for your organization. How does a mid-sized company sort of deal with that landscape, trying to figure out which tools to use in this world where we're constantly being disrupted?
I think that's where the open connections really come in, right? Is that as long as you're working for something or a tool where you can integrate with it and be able to add to it, and you may have parts of it that eventually go away and get replaced by something else, but as long as they're able to connect to each other, you can do that transition.
And I think the other place where sort of the ability to rapidly deploy and take advantage of some new tools, really a factor is in the cloud. I feel like I'm checking off buzzwords here, but when you look at a public cloud implementation from us or our competitors, you can put in a credit card and go. So line of business can employ that themselves. They don't have to worry about is our IT organization ready for this? They don't have to worry about other departments buying in and sharing cost. You're really on that service model, and we've put all these tools in the cloud, in the public cloud from IBM and our Smart Cloud for Social Business, precisely because that's where we see, especially in the mid-market, this ease of adoption, this ease of deployment. And if you're done with it, that's fine. You can move on too.
So
the cloud really enables these, mid-market and small, very small businesses to take advantage of solutions that, in the past only a large organization could really afford or, have the wherewithal to use. So I think that, that's a way really to level the playing field and get on board with a lot of the solutions that you're going to need.
So another question, again, a lot of things coming from a lot of questions we have coming from Twitter here in terms of people from a global perspective. One really caught my attention here, and that is it seems that the reason why mid-sized businesses seem to be more reluctant than large organizations to adopt social business is not the technology, but the energy and means needed to drive change. So do you think specific change approaches have to be designed, and what would they look like? So curious to see what the panel thinks about this.
So at IBM, the way that we did this change was we wrote a set of social computing guidelines. They started in the first version in 2005, and they were written by people like me. I contributed to it along with a half dozen other people in lines of business, marketing, corporate communications. We had system administrators, people just throughout IBM work on this document together, and then we got the organizational buy-in from legal and HR and finance and from the top. But the guidelines are different than any other policy document I've ever worked on in that we told our employees what we wanted them to do instead of what we didn't want them to do. So you can go Google IBM Social Computing Guidelines. We publish them externally. We think they're a best practice. But we had to go tell employees, here's something we believe in and we're going to back you on, as opposed to, oh, stay away from that, let's lock the door.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think also, at a medium-sized company, it may not be as all-encompassing or as formal a process maybe as at IBM, but I think it's really important to kind of sit down and say, what is this all about? Make sure we understand what it's all about. How does it relate to our company? How does it relate to the way we're going to do business? And then, you can start with a specific thing that you really think it can impact in a positive way and go forward from there.
Right, and then you can use that solution of, hey, look how well we did with that. We put this community in for this part of the business or whatever, and they had this great success, and then you can start growing from there. So some of it may just be picking some places are going to be good examples, getting those deployed, having that can be part of your greater plan, and somebody can sort of behind the scenes be coordinated to make sure you ensure success, but it can be done at a small scale, and then you start pointing people to that success and can grow from there.
I mean, it could be something as simple as, I don't remember, Hanley, whether it was you or Ed just talking about the fact that we don't have a good way to find out, for people in our company to know who everybody else is in our company and who has expertise in this and who has knowledge about that, and how can we easily get connected and share information. It could be something as simple as that can start the ball rolling, and then you build on it.
So my next question, this is also coming from Twitter at the moment, from @ED Larson. So how will the most successful organizations support social business efforts that easily span internal, external, and social media?
I think that's one of the big challenge areas now, right? You have a lot of, inward-facing tools that can do all that, and there's a lot of security around that too. Like, we don't want somebody to just sort of click on business plan and share to the world or something, right? But being able to bring in a seamless manner, again, so you don't have these separate streams that are there, being able to bring those in and bring in a controlled manner the customer interaction, interaction with your supply chain and all that with your business is really going to be a key, I think, as we evolve over the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I think we're in the early going with that. So, but I mean, for a mid-sized company, what I would be looking for anyway is a platform that would enable just what Hanley said, to figure out which external feeds we need to bring in and make sure that when, like for instance, if I'm a sales rep, I can not only see the internal activity and everything around, client A, but I can also see, oh, client A's been tweeting about that and, has posted, this relevant information on Facebook, because it's just expanding that 360-degree client view.
Yeah, we think about sentiment analysis a lot. Sorry, I did another buzzword there. But the notion of really hearing the entire market, even where you're not necessarily listening, and aggregating it in ways that then you're not just reacting to an individual voice, you're reacting to the whole crowd, not just sort of the loudest voice in the crowd or the person, I sort of think about it like a cocktail party. You want to know everything that's going on in that room. You don't want to just hear one conversation as part of it. And so that could be inside the organization, it could be outside the organization, or it could be an aggregation of both.
I think that analytics part is, we all heard the big data from IBM, and obviously there's been a lot of discussion of that this week with the elections, and how the people who were looking at data came out better on predictions than people who just chased after one or two data points. And for companies understanding, even the external is obvious. There's great tools for doing customer sentiment analysis and all that, as well as, but even internally, right? See which communities are being used in our social tools the most. Which pieces of it. We've seen companies deploy something like Connections, thinking that one piece of it was going to be their big value, and then the employees get hold of it, and that first project was good, but then they suddenly notice that people in another area is where they're really getting a lot of value, and being able to have the analytics to understand where that is, and then be able to lift up those efforts and praise them, so everybody else can start copying it.
So. Just want to be constant of time here, but we always when we host these Futurecasts, we always like to sort of hear predictions toward the end. I mean, that's always the fun part of speculative theory, is where things headed. So I do want to know where, in terms of where you think everything will be, where do you think mid-sized companies will be in 5 years from now? What do you think the landscape really will look like out there in terms of how businesses will operate? And you can get as granular as you want to. Ed, what's your prediction?
Yeah, I think one of the keys is that they'll be, I'd like to tie it back to thoughts I've already introduced, this notion that they'll be incorporating the right people into their innovation cycles, into their customer care. I think that's really where things will be dramatically different in 5 years, is that you won't really think about, okay, is this person really an employee of the organization I'm working with, or are they really just the best person to represent the information that I need at a particular moment? We like to think about the notion of curation today, where humans want to rely on other humans. They don't want to rely on static websites and paid media that's inserting messages into them anymore. It's really about how are you earning the trust and how are you earning the reputation. So I think mid-sized businesses will have the opportunity to grow very rapidly, much as they did in the Web 2.0 and e-commerce era, just because a search engine could find them and bring them customers that they didn't have before. Now humans can recommend them and endorse them in ways that they couldn't have before. So I think that will be transformational in terms of being able to bring trusted companies to the right people who want to buy from them in the future.
And Hanley, what's your prediction? Next 5 years, what do you think it'll look like out there?
Well, I think Ed's, exactly right on how that's going to transform the businesses. I think we're going to see, social become the norm. So it's no longer we're not going to be talking about, oh, do you have a way to collaborate? That's people are going to essentially, you either have it or you don't. And the people who don't, I think, are not going to do well in business because they're just not going to have been as competitive. They're going to have issues of people come to the company, and you don't want to show up for you have young people, but even people who are maybe a little bit older, like some of us, are going to be coming into a company saying, hey, what tools am I going to have to get my job done? And if you answer, well, I'm going to give you email and a phone number, then I'll say, hey, who's this other one? And I see customers doing that as well. So it's a business imperative that people can connect with this way, because customers go look and say, look, if I see your company, I see company A, it doesn't have any way for me to connect to them. I can't see my accounts. I can't get hold of somebody when I want to. There's no way to do that. And then their competitor has the same pricing, similar products, maybe even more expensive, but I'm going to go choose them because I know that I've got a much better personal connection with that company, and I see them wanting to reach out to me, so I'm going to go with company B, and they're going to be successful because I have that interaction.
And Lori, what your prediction?
Yeah, I totally agree with Hanley. I mean, we did a study and found that the companies with a more collaborative culture actually are more profitable than companies that don't have a collaborative culture. So I think, there's a mandate there, and what I would hope is that, in a few years, implementing these solutions to enable that more social and collaborative environment will be a lot easier. And it won't be so much about individual solutions like YouTube and Facebook and this, but that mid-sized businesses, more of them, will have a platform that lets them very flexibly add or subtract different channels and set up different rules and involve different parts of internal and external constituencies as they need to bring them into different conversations, so that it can just become part of the natural workflow.
Well, great. There's one more question I'm gonna lay out on the panel, and then I do want to thank everyone on here who participated today. It's unfortunate Luis Suarez wasn't able to dial in from Barcelona today. We'll have to get him on another Futurecast. But Ed Brill, I'm looking forward to your book, Opting In, coming out in January.
Thank you.
Hanley Cameron from Prolifics and Lori McCabe. But final question that came to us from Twitter: is adoption of internal collaboration technology for medium-sized businesses a cost issue more than a mindset issue?
Well, for mid-market, I think it's a priority issue. I think they're trying to wrestle with so many business and technology priorities, and it's a question of when that comes at the top of the priority list. And I think a lot of times it doesn't get to the top of the list until they realize that the way they're doing business and is just not working, and they've hit a wall, and they realize that maybe using some of these more social and collaborative tools is a way for them to get over that wall.
Well, I think you're exactly right. It's a priority issue. I think the cost and the adoption are things that are actually making people a little scared to get into it, because they think it's one of these things like the old when we used to change out ERP systems, and it was a nice 5-year-long project and cost millions and millions of dollars, which mid-market in this economy just can't handle that. And as Ed pointed out earlier, I think if they can help to be shown that, hey, look, you don't have to go all in. Let's it's anything that you're going to start changing your culture, you want to pick the right area to start small, get success, then build on that, and that will help alleviate both the cost and the culture issues.
Right. As a vendor, I think I'm supposed to say it must be a cultural issue, but not a cost issue, right? But I think it's a little of both, and I think that there's some real opportunities for leadership. I was on a panel at Social Media Week about 6 weeks ago with a CEO of a bank in New Jersey here in the U.S., and he strongly believes that everybody in his company should represent the company both internally and externally through social, that they're getting their best ideas on new products and new offerings they can make to customers that way, and that he's meeting customers he would never otherwise have interacted with as a result of this social culture. So this is a small bank, a little community bank with five branches, and I think that was really an endorsement of how the cultural aspect can be addressed in a mid-sized business.
Great. Well, I want to thank again all of you for joining us this morning. Laurie McCabe from SMB Group, Hanley Cameron from Prolifics, and Ed Brill from IBM. Again, you can follow us on Twitter at MidmarketIBM, hashtag Futurecast for our future Futurecast that we'll be hosting on our YouTube channel. Like us on Facebook. Facebook.com/MidmarketIBM. Join our LinkedIn group for deeper discussions, linked.in/MidmarketIBM. And of course, if you are watching us live here on our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you can continue to get great content from IBM for mid-sized businesses. So thanks again to the panel for joining us. I really appreciate your time. This is a great subject and one that I think a lot of businesses really need to pay more attention to as we move forward. So thanks again for your expertise here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Have a great morning, everyone.